Let's use the Effect Language Service plugin to get useful diagnostics for our Effect code base. Here's an ordinary TypeScript project. We're looking at the package JSON. And the first thing we're going to do to set up this language service plugin is to create a prepare script. This prepare script is going to run tspatch install-s. So every time we run an npm install or remove a dependency or affect the node modules in any way, it's going to run this tspatch. We can install this tspatch package by running bun-i. We'll install it as a dev dependency, and we're going to bring in tspatch. And then the other thing we're going to want to install is the effect/language service. You'll notice that after having installed those packages, the prepare script was executed. So at this point, our local copy of the TypeScript language server has been patched. Inside of our VS Code settings JSON, we're going to create a new field that is going to specify the TSDK that we want to utilize. And we're going to point it to node modules/TypeScript/lib. Now let's go to your tsconfig. In my case, since I'm in a monorepo, we're going to be looking at the tsconfig.base, since this is what every package in my workspace extends. However, you don't need to be using a monorepo. This could be your tsconfig.json, just whichever config contains the compiler option that's being used by the language server. We're going to add a new entry to our compiler options, and this entry is going to be named plugins. This is an array. And this array is going to contain objects. Each object is a plugin, and in the case of the Effect Language Service plugin, the name is going to be effect/language service. The transform is going to be effect/language service/transform. We're going to give it namespace import packages. And for now, we'll just specify effect. We'll get into this momentarily as this usage is optional but recommended. So we will go over this. Next, I'm going to specify diagnostic severity with an import from barrel set to error. Now that we've configured the plugin, let's go to a TypeScript file. So I'll go to this root file. We're not getting any diagnostics yet, so let's pull up the command palette and select TypeScript version and use workspace version. And we should see some diagnostics now. If you're not seeing diagnostics, then trigger a reload of the window. If you look at the quick fix menu for this diagnostic, you see we can import stars console from effect console. So let's select that. We still have this diagnostic, but it's the same diagnostic as before. So let's again use the quick fix option. Importing the given module from the package export path is better for a few reasons. The main thing is probably there's just less code to statically analyze, and it's easier on JavaScript runtimes. The other benefit is that in Effect library code, so libraries that are using Effect under the hood, we're going to want to use the module path as to avoid creating dead code issues for the consumer of the library. And so yeah, it's really nice that now we have diagnostics and quick fix options in order to enforce that. However, we see it's not being enforced for the Effect AI package. What we can do is we can copy this package name, go back to our tsconfig, and add it to this list. Now if we go back to the root and we reload the language server, we are getting this diagnostic as well as the quick fix option. The other diagnostics are a little more universal. So although using the package exports path might be preferable in a lot of use cases, it's also perfectly valid for you to import directly from Effect if you need to, whereas there are certain things in Effect that are always errors. For instance, what happens if we forget to yield this item? Well, without the language server giving us this diagnostic, we wouldn't get any error here, because technically this is valid JavaScript. Whereas with Effect, an effect is a value, but it needs to be yielded or explicitly executed somehow. If we forget the yield, it probably means that we made a mistake. If we were to capture this inside of a variable, we would no longer see that error because perhaps we take G and do something with it. So here we see another diagnostic, which is G is declared, but its value is never read. And this is a fitting diagnostic. We don't need anything effect specific here. But once again, if we were to have that value dangling, we would get that effect error because this does need to be yielded in order for it to have any kind of an effect. Pardon my overuse of the term effect. The language service gives us some other really nice to have features. If we were to hover over language model, we would just see a reference to this tag. but we don't know the type of the resulting value, or the potential errors, or the new requirements. If we go over to the yield and hover over the yield, however, we see it. If we hover over the yield of the model.generate text, we'll see the success is an AI response, the error is an AI error, and it has no additional requirements. So that's pretty useful for being able to see the way that a given effect impacts the signature of the effect gen body within which it's yielded. Let's look at another diagnostic. If we were to yield but forget the star and say console.log text, this would now give us a much better diagnostic. When yielding effects inside effect.gen, you should use yield star instead of yield. And this makes sense for effects given that yield star can actually return a typed value, whereas yield without the star can't. Now let's go over some more cool usage. If I yield effect.gen, I get some handy completions here. Within here, let's say that I yield a console.log from child effect, and I return this. We're getting this underline beneath the effect usage. If I look at the diagnostic, it says effect.gen contains a single return statement. This is an error because this console log is fundamentally the same thing. We could instead just yield the console log. Another really awesome feature is we can take any async function and rewrite to effect gen. This will give us the function from before, but returning an effect. And inside of this, any async code, so what we had before was this promise.resolve, is going to be refactored with effect.promise. So yeah, the effect language service plugin is extremely useful. I'd imagine it will only get more useful, and it's definitely worth installing in your project. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.